I'm on my way to look at a property where the customer is, or it's a contractor rather, and what he's trying to do is replace the driveway, and there's a big tree that's near the driveway that they're concerned about damaging. So I'm going to kind of go over all the things I see on that tree and what they need to be careful of and watch out for, so they can hopefully put a new driveway back in. Also, the person that lives there is having trouble getting, they're afraid, they have a little bit of unsteadiness, they're older, they're afraid they might trip on the raised pieces of concrete and so on and so forth, so they really want to replace it, but they also like their tree. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Here's this live oak. Looks like it's about 36 inches or 38 inches in diameter, so you can see it's lifted the curb up pretty bad. They've tried to shave it down. You also have this here, and you can see that sidewalk is sort of tilted as well and more shaving. You can see it's pushed up. The contractor here is trying to replace this driveway. So I always tell everybody to remove these pieces of concrete by hand, and then what we try to do is some selective root pruning, or if we can put in some structural soil, or there's some other options with some material that's sort of soft and flexes with roots as they grow, and that product is called FlexiPave. And so that's sometimes an option. Those are all things that I usually try to recommend to preserve a tree like this. We don't want to cut roots that close though, because it can destabilize the tree. So if there is anything in there, in this area, we want to keep any roots that we would cut in there at 1 inch diameter or less. And we only want to cut the roots that we know are causing the problem. Then ideally, if we can put rock on top or something like a little bit bigger aggregate material, it can create pore space. It'll create a high percentage of oxygen and keep the tree roots from growing up higher. It'll kind of trick them into staying lower. There's some studies that have been done by Dr. Ed Gilman where he shows this research under sidewalks. So we try to use that data and build this system. And the nice part here is they have a bit of a slope up to their driveway. So if we had to hump up over this, we could, and we wouldn't have a drainage problem coming off. So that's the big thing, is sometimes we have a flat driveway in. That's really hard, because if we have a hump, then the water could drain back at the garage, which we don't want. We don't want to go in the garage. So here we're going to try to create a hump over this to make it in there so that we can preserve these roots. That'll make it so we cut the least amount of roots as possible to make this happen, and that the tree stays stable. One big thing to keep in mind is you need to be at least 3 times the diameter of the tree away to cut any roots, to make sure that it doesn't destabilize the tree. A lot of the standards reference being 5 times the diameter away from the tree, which isn't feasible here with keeping the tree. Even at 3 times the diameter, we're going to be, that would be somewhere more over here than where it is. So we would be inside what we call the critical root zone. So that's why it's really important that we only cut roots that are 1 inch diameter or less, and we only cut the roots that we know are causing this problem. And that way we still have the rest of the roots. So it's selective. And if we lift this driveway by hand or carefully, like we can sometimes do it with a grapple truck, so we're not like digging under it, because if you dig under it, then people rip all the roots out trying to do it. So these are just some things to keep in mind when doing a project like this. Some other things to kind of look at. I noticed that he's got a lot of surface rooting. Usually that means like a high water table or a lot of watering. I also noticed that there's some wounds here, and then up here that come down. I'm not sure what that's from. A lot of times when we see that sort of flashing down at the bottom, that can be from a lightning strike that sort of exits out the bottom. But it does look like the tree has reacted and is growing new tissue, which we call response growth here, to compensate for that loss. I don't see flashing up the center. That makes me wonder if it was lightning. We do have an inclusion in here. This is a defect where we have 2 stems that have not fused together well. So there's a more likelihood of split. That's where, you keep pruning in the very ends and put in brace rods and cables to keep it stable. Really helps. But here's some of these high surface roots. You can see, looks like there's, Verizon wire, Verizon cable there. Here's the other side where we see that defect that's split. This is that union that we want to brace together by drilling rods through it, so the rods would go through to hold it together.